this pod has been running since early March, and it's been amazing to see how everyone has just learned the technology so fast. Because when I first started, it was just the tech was weird. People were still figuring it out. It was hard to like connect, dial up. And now like everybody I call, like you've got the sweet microphone, the windscreen, the headphones. So it's all coming together. And also the pacing of a conversation online, so much easier now than it was early on because
you're not always interrupting.
Yeah.
That was my joke.
That was good.
There.
But yeah, it's more of a volleyball match instead of or it's more of a football game versus like a volleyball match. It's longer riffs. So I find that cool. I think it's working out all right.
It's been a good pivot. I miss the energy I miss playing with people a lot. And I miss making music with other people, and I miss playing in front of live audiences.
Sure.
I mean, there's I would describe it as kind of like the difference between masturbating and having sex with someone you love. It's like you still get somewhere. It's still technically a sexual activity, but it's not going to be
exactly.
the same.
Yeah.
And it's like there's something about just where everybody can go together if you're all in a room.
Yeah. And you guys
I miss the interactivity.
It sounds like you're pretty tight friends over the years, your bandmates.
We do okay. We're not actually really social with each other. We get together when we work and we get along and we enjoy each other when we're doing that, but we don't really hang out outside. It's just kind of how it's gone.
I guess I didn't actually know the answer to that. I don't know why I assumed that, but I think because you've been a band for so long, it's just like you must have this. You have a really great balance with and be buds.
Yeah, and like any relationship, it requires maintenance and knowing each other and reaching a point of peace where you don't require other people to change to make you happy. And, that's a big step. We broke up years ago for a while. We weren't getting along at all well. We got back together and we had a lot of rocky years. And I think as we got older, it just kind of comes to this place of understanding each other a little more and letting each other be ourselves. Kind of the key to any relationship is go like, okay, this is where we do good stuff together. Yep. This is where it really works.
So did you have to have some really
resenting people for?
Oh, sorry to cut you off there. Did you have some like really hard talks to the point where those talks kind of like lifted you into the next tier of friendship?
Yeah, I'm going to say yes and no because we're not. I'm a very like kind of warm, fuzzy, new agey, here's my feelings, let's cry together kind of person. And the rest of the band is not in any way whatsoever like that. And so I think we've just agreed to be different and respect each other.
Sure.
And it just took time and everybody doing their own growth and their own pattern and, kind of slowly giving each other room and giving each other, I think over time, more appreciation. It used to be a band where it's like, if you were doing your job well, nobody said anything, but people would let you know when you were fucking up.
Sure.
And so as time went on, I think we appreciate each other more. And we realize everyone needs to hear it.
Yeah.
And I think there was a time where we were all waiting for something to say something nice to each other and nobody was.
Yeah, I hear you. And I feel like giving compliments it's like, it can be such an intimate thing that it's almost like can be hard to do, and just the same way that it's kind of hard to take a compliment right to the face. It's like that, it's like this kind of extremely intimate and vulnerable thing. When really, I guess it should be relatively simple, but often you can forget to do it. I forget to do it sometimes too, just because like I'll be with my bandmates so often that sometimes I forget to say like, damn, that was an incredible drum fill. We could do that more, and even little stuff like that. It's just like, it's this boost to the morale-o-meter of the collective unit, or just whether we're talking about music or just friendships, it just really can take your friendships to another level. And on the contrary to that, Glenn, I feel like, I've had some blowouts with some friends, and that has been rough, but it's brought us so much closer, and we're like tighter than ever, so I agree. I can relate to being someone who cries a lot. I feel like I cry a lot.
Yeah, I'm definitely the wet blanket in the band.
Yeah. Who are some of your like 90s allies that you were really close to, as far as other groups, other bands?
I mean, that I see regularly, that we toured with back in the day. I'm trying to think. I mean, Willie Porter is probably my closest friend from
Are you
those
serious?
days.
Willie lives down the street from me. He's a great bud.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah.
We were both opening for the Cranberries. He was first to three. And of, anybody I toured with from way back when, who I still just, I just called to say I love you. Like that's Willie. And there's people, like I Jesse and Scotty from the Gin Blossoms, I always really
love
liked.
Gin Blossoms, one of my all-time favorite bands.
And, but I don't keep up. And, I see Mark Bryan from Hootie when I'm out in, the Carolinas, but it's like, I don't, it's interesting. I don't affiliate in a lot of ways with the 90s. It was this like it's such a long time ago.
Sure.
And so much changed, and there's so many people. But other bands like Geggy Ta, Greg from Geggy Ta, Tommy Jordan, check in. But it's a once in a blue moon thing, as opposed to like an ongoing, like, hey buddy.
Yep. I remember we played this festival on a cruise liner in January called the Rock Boat. I think you guys have done that before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I heard people talking about you on the boat, so I kind of went back and revisited some of your records.
Yeah, the world that I really keep in touch with is, I mean, the 90s, and that was my early 20s and everything. That was kind of my, equivalent of a college experience. And, we met some awesome people. But, my closest musical friends, I probably started making after the band when I started playing at Cafe Largo in Los Angeles. And so that was, Glen Phillips.
Oh, yeah,
and Sean and Sarah from Nickel Creek. I feel, I don't know, Dan Wilson. There's a longer list from there of like people I check in with more and feel closer to.
Sure. And Dan Wilson, that's from Semisonic, right? Yeah, cool. I remember he was kind of, when I was a little guy buying CDs and looking at the liner notes and looking at the pictures, I remember he was like the first album I got that like where it was not like this cool band. It was like you could be a little bit of a geek and still rock out and do it right, And I always feel like I connected with him because he kind of embodied that you don't have to be this flashy, cool band to play rock and roll. And I always felt like I related to him.
Yeah, I mean, he's an art nerd from Minneapolis. It's like
Minneapolis. I feel like that. Like when you tour and play gigs, I feel like kind of wherever you are in the world, there's generally like similarities between the cities. What songs are going to work, what jokes are going to work. But I feel like Minneapolis is like that one of those outlier cities where you just have no idea how people are going to respond to things. I don't know if it's because it's an oasis or because it's a little hipper than the average town. Are there any cities that you've found to be just weird ones that you could never get a pulse on the crowd?
Well, for me, I'll backtrack for half a second and just say, for me, Minneapolis, I've always kind of liked it. Just because, I mean, that was Between Husker Du and the Replacements, those were like two of the most important bands for us growing up, like getting together. Those were really important formative bands for Toad. And so between that and Prince and that whole world, and then Semisonic as well. And there's such a variety of really interesting, good art that came out of there. And I felt like that city had, like, as much as it had all these different scenes, I don't know, something bound it together. Everybody seemed to be into everybody else's music.
Cool.
And there was a wide berth of allowance. So I always kind of liked Minneapolis. Strangest town for us, or like there's a town you could never crack.
Yes.
Madison, Wisconsin.
I lived there for 5 years.
We could never crack Madison. I felt like either we weren't like rock enough, or we weren't jam band enough, or we weren't something.
They call Madison the musician's graveyard.
Really?
Yeah. I think it's a transient college town. And as much as I love Madison, it's my home for 5 years. It does have that kind of lazy, intellectual kind of vibe where, people will just spend 9 hours at a coffee shop ripping cigarettes and drinking coffee and talking about academia. And that's cool. But I never connected with Madison in like a musical sense. But so I can see where you'd say that.
I get that. But then again, like there's other, we had great shows in Ithaca. We had great shows in Athens, like Miami University. Holy crap, in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we came out, we were a college band, up until we had a hit.
Yeah.
and then nobody knew what to do with us. But, when we were in the early 90s doing that college circuit, that was a huge amount.
That sounds cool. It sounds like I don't really know that the college circuit really exists anymore. I've done college shows. I've had friends do college shows, but the college circuit, that NACA circuit, has the reputation for just being kind of like in shambles, and people aren't necessarily turning out to the gigs. So
I never played NACA stuff. I've heard some that it's like the NACA gigs. It's like they pay surprisingly well, but you might be playing for 5 people in the lunchroom.
Yeah, $3,000 for a 45-minute set to 3 people in the cafe. Not a bad deal.
Honestly, as I get older, it's like $3,000 money. That's more than I make.
That's a briefcase of money.
It's a briefcase of money. So there's a certain part that's like, at this point in my life, I feel like that, there's this internal debate of, how much do I need and what do I want out of life? And, even thinking about just the environmental impact and the waste involved in touring, it really troubles me. I don't like the footprint of touring. Yep. It's, and so I love playing music in front of people. I love making people happy. But honestly, like that kind of stuff really bugs me.
I get it. What do you think you'd be doing if you weren't playing music? Like what gets you pumped outside of music?
Not much, to be honest. No, what would I do outside of music? I don't know. If I went back to school, I think I might want to study like somatic therapy.
What's somatic therapy?
Somatic therapy is kind of the idea of body-based therapy, so that we kind of hold trauma physically, and that there are ways of releasing trauma that are less storytelling and more using the body to release trauma, to kind of bring things out that are suppressed. And yeah, that stuff is really fascinating to me.
So what would be like a phase 1 maneuver to kind of relieve trauma in the body?
What would be a phase 1?
Like if yoga has trauma? The downward dog, what is Semantic's first move?
Well, once again, I only know in kind of my, somatic therapy, I would place things like internal family systems a little in that, or like Tara Brach and, her meditation styles within, simply the idea of if you are, feeling a voice inside you, wondering if it's your actual self or if it's some kind of, injured part that's kind of splintered off and is trying to protect you. Recognizing that thing, acknowledging it, seeing where it is in the body, describing how it feels. So you're able to kind of separate little protective subroutines from your actual more wise and embodied self.
Okay.
And the idea is that those parts can kind of masquerade as you, your fear, your doubt, your, self-hate, criticism, all these other things, but they're not actually really you.
Yep.
And so using the body as kind of an entryway into doing that, but you can integrate, if people need to do movement, shaking, like trembling as a trauma release. Animals, when they've been through really hard stuff, they just tremble for a long time. So it's kind of encouraging these physical releases to kind of open up an ability to have a less triggered conversation with these kind of personality subroutine.
Okay. It sounds like it's almost like you're like meditating, but like hyper focused on like specific physical sections of your body, kind of.
Maybe. And I wish I knew more about it directly. Like I said, I'm curious.
Yeah. No, it's good to be curious.
And have had, have had my own experiences where things come out that, in my own, because I've suffered from depression for a number of years. And I mean, it's the other thing is I don't think I would want to be in the position as a therapist until I'd found a level of peace, which doesn't mean you get rid of all those voices, but it just means they don't run the show anymore. And you're able to go like, oh, that's the voice that's saying it and you suck. And, and just like, puppy, come here, let me hold you. Like, instead of going like, I need to kill myself. So it's, how am I trying to describe this? It's letting the body kind of be the gateway instead of having mind and storytelling and like reliving of the past and description. I'm an overthinker. Yep. I have a really active brain. And so narrating and storytelling is a way I have of, in one sense, lying to myself.
Sure.
Right? I create a narrative where I'm a victim, I'm this, I'm that. And entering by the body instead of through the mind takes me out of a storytelling mode and allows something kind of truer to emerge. And so that to me has proven a lot more useful than a straight talking modality.
So Glenn, you talk about kind of the voices in your head. Is there a particular voice that kind of has like maybe haunted you more than the others, as far as like, is it like the self-critical one where it's like, maybe this song's not going to hold up, or is it a different voice, a different character in your head?
It's mostly self-criticism. It's I mean, I think there's a combination of an addictive, indulgent part of me that luckily, thank God, it didn't like cocaine. But once again, I'm like a fragile enough flower that simply drinking with any regularity, and I'm not talking binge drinking, I'm talking like a drink or two a night, I plummet, I tank. Yep. And so a little bit of addiction, heavy self-criticism, and like a kind of perfectionism, like I have to do everything right for everybody else to be okay. And then just a feeling of despair that I'm, never going to get it together, that I drive everybody away and always fail at everything.
Yep.
And that can even turn, and people go like, but Glenn, you had a fabulously successful band at the age of 22. It was a long time ago, number one. And even when it was happening, I'm like, this is going to fall apart. I don't believe this. I'm going to get caught. And they're going to figure out that I don't belong here and that I'm faking it and that they
Right.
think I'm something I'm not. And when the band broke up and when I couldn't get a record deal again, I just like absolutely cratered for years, lost a good decade.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. There is that self-criticism where, you hear that almost advice people give you, like, what do you got to worry about? You got everything going for you. And really, that's like the last thing you ever want to hear. I remember dating a girl early on who had like pretty severe bipolar. She was really brilliant, but just so tormented. And then like after I kind of would read into it more, it was like the number one advice I always read was, don't tell people how great their life is when they're feeling depressed, because that just makes you feel worse,
It's weird because then you feel ungrateful, and it's proof that you're a terrible person, that you have this wonderful life and that people love you and are showing up for you and you can't even be there for them. That's like the worst thing.
Right.
And so, that's why the first step is to let that part be heard. Like that's the thing. It wants to just be heard and not be judged, and other things open up. And it's a hard one to explain. Depression ultimately cost me my marriage. And it's that thing of like, how do you show up for a person, when you don't want to indulge the depression and you don't want to validate the victimhood, but at the same time, you have to hear the pain of it, because the pain of it's very real.
Yep.
And to like acknowledge the pain without indulging the story is a really fine line to walk. And I don't envy the people who have been close to me and had to deal with all of this.
And there is that artist mentality where you're like, you almost buy into your own depression or anxiety, where you're like, well, I'm an artist. This is what happens, and you can almost like lean into it too much. And you're like, well, I'm an artist. I get depressed. That's what I do. And then you can kind of like make it your thing, which is a very dangerous thing that I've done in short spurts. And I've seen a couple of my friends and allies do in longer forms.
Well, and the thing there is, I like to think of it as that I have really high dynamic range, right? It's the difference between like, a little dynamic microphone and a Neumann 87 modified by Stephen Paul.
That sounds cool.
Call me for all your voiceover needs.
Yeah, nice.
And so it's the difference in, dynamic range. I can go really low. I can go really high. I am familiar with, it's the great thing about being an artist, right? You perceive beauty in such a piercing way. Ecstasy, love, like those are real and tangible. And, there's a Thich Nhat Hanh poem called Please Call Me by My True Names that it's like, what is it? My joy is a spring so warm, it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is a river of tears so vast it fills the four oceans. It's like, they're the same thing.
Yeah.
And so remaining open while not succumbing to despair and these sad stories, or not getting lost also in ecstasy. I have friends who are, once again, more on the bipolar side, who can also like, wow, when they're big, they're a little too big.
Yeah.
And it's exciting for a minute and then it's different.
Yep.
And so it's like, how can you contain all that dynamic range and, hold it from a solid center? And it takes a lot of practice. And in my case, the times when I've been good are the times like I'm not drinking, I'm meditating every day, I'm exercising. It takes a lot of like self-care and things to align myself. And when I let those go, the inevitable result is like a collapse into depression and self-hate. And it happens every time. And it's like, in the same way you can't like plant a garden and then go on vacation for 3 months and come back and expect to have a whole bunch of tomatoes waiting for you. And you got to actually care for it.
When you say,
or it's going to die.
Glenn, when you say like when you hit a crater and you kind of bottomed out, depression, self-loathing, that kind of thing. Like what did that kind of look like, and how did you climb out of it?
I mean, really fucking ugly is the best answer. And I've climbed out of it at different times,
like a lot
in
of like
ways.
boozing, or what was like your vice?
My vice was just self-indulgence and despair. I mean, honestly, I have I would say a fairly low tolerance for substance abuse. So like I said, it doesn't take much alcohol to just make me sad all the time. I've never been, I don't know, somehow I feel really lucky for this. I've never been a guy who could disappear in a bottle for a long time. And I'm terribly grateful for that. Like my bottom there is at a pretty high level.
Sure.
And so, which is not to say, I haven't had long periods where I just drink every day for years, but not drunk, I read something once that was talking about like para-alcoholism, where you're not missing appointments. You're not doing things, you're not blacking out. You're not doing things you regret. You're not hungover.
Yep.
You're just always in a depressed state.
Yep.
And I've lived there for long periods of time. So, and it's weird because alcoholism is, for my friends who are, sober and 12-stepping and in that, like they did some wild shit.
Yeah.
They made some impressive splashes, and they have great, they have, oh God, my stories. I don't have any of those.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I just kind of drank a couple of beers a night for 3 years and I never felt good.
Yeah.
ever.
That I feel that like that one or two, being in my 30s now, I never get that like body hangover, the classic boozing the night before hangover. But yeah, it's like those one or two beers that can really give you that emotional hangover. And in a way, like you say, it is a kind of a decent form of checks and balances, because sometimes I theorize that the power alcoholics, like the lifers, they can kind of just booze and never be physically hungover, and that's kind of enables the alcoholism.
Yeah, and there's also just, I had a friend who was kind of describing, different drugs / medicines, and, this, are they kind of taking something from the future, right? That, coffee, caffeine is kind of taking this afternoon's energy and giving it to you now.
Yep.
And so it's this balance of how much energy do you want to pull from your future to feel it in the morning. And you negotiate these things, and that alcohol, and it was the greatest description. He's like, what alcohol does is it takes a little bit of tomorrow's happiness and gives it to you in that first 30 minutes.
Borrowing from tomorrow. That's good.
And so you get this little serotonin blast in that first, 30 minutes, even an hour of alcohol, even an hour, 2 hours, it's like lasts for a little while. You get this high, and and then you hit tomorrow. And if you're not drinking every day, and if you're fairly full of happiness, you can afford to tipple a little off the top, then let it refill over the next few days. And then you're full again, and then you're good. And then maybe, once a week, have another drink, and you take it down, and it gets up. But if you do it every day, just the reserve goes down until you hit zero.
Yep.
and then there you are. And you keep drinking, hoping to get that tomorrow's happiness back. And it's not, you're done, you're out. You don't have that reserve. And so, like my girlfriend is really good about like, she likes her wine when she has her wine, but she's a teacher, she's a mother, she likes to be present, she has a deep yoga practice. Like she doesn't want anything to get in the way of those things. And if she, and I've, in the two plus years we've been together, anytime she's had alcohol twice in a row, She's like, shit.
Yep.
And it's only happened like twice, and she totally feels the difference, but she does her wine on Friday and that's it.
Yep. The
really enjoys it, but then fills up again.
Yeah. The moralometer, you know, it's perhaps, what do you call the meter? Do you have a name for the meter?
A moralometer works.
Moralometer, yeah.
Because it also, it's also sounds kind of like I don't know, like something akin to a platypus.
I love the word morale. I use it daily. And I think that I wish I would have known about the moralometer in my 20s, because any time now where I know I'm way up here, I know I'm going to have to pay that later. You know, you have to pay the feel-good tax. And that was just something kind of, as a younger person, I never realized that, well, hey, I'm running out of juice. I'm running out of, what is it, dopamine or whatever. And I gotta take care of my physical health for the sake of my mental health, or I'm going to go down the toilet bowl here. So that's something that it's great to be aware of the moralometer and know that it's like that yin and the yang in Chinese medicine. It's so true. It's like you're going to have to pay for the highs, and on the other side, the lows are temporary and they're not going to last forever. And I find comfort in that. And I believe, like,
and learning to just take the lows and sit with them, feel them, and move through them, and not like, you know, the problem is we spend so much energy running away from the lows and trying to avoid them and mask them and hide them, instead of just being with them. And when you develop those skills, and I've come and gone with it. I mean, I'm in a state right now where I'm like, I'm needing to, this year, I think I'm realizing how deeply it's depressed me.
Yep.
And I've been doing a lot of work to try to get my act together, because I'm afraid I'll lose my relationship. I'm afraid I'll lose things I really care about again if I don't. And, it's kind of vital that I get that strength back and do the work now. And so, the other thing I will say about the moralometer and being a touring musician, getting back to dirt from the road, is that there are very few jobs in the world where not only are you encouraged to drink on the job, but you are given an endless supply of free alcohol. And playing in places like, it's like, have a bottle of wine. You're a city winery. Better if you have a bottle of wine and you drink that whole bottle of wine during your set.
What do you mean you're not going to drink with us? You know, that's a trap.
Yeah, shots on the edge of the stage, like, come on, tequila. And so it's why so many artists are just absolute sober and have drawn that line. And I think a lot of those artists, would not, in another situation, have qualified themselves as alcoholic. But once again, yes, please drink on the job. Here's as much free alcohol as you want. You don't even have to worry about the tab, right?
Yeah.
And like, so there's not even an economic break on it. It's literally only like, do you have enough self-respect to not lose your shit every night? And people really fight with it over a long time. And I think people who would, be in that normie category of like, I can have, I have a beer here and there. It's really hard on tour.
Yep.
And I've gone on tours, and I, even back in the TOAD days, sometimes I would just have to be like, okay, either I'm not drinking at all, or I will have like a drink or two only on days off, never on show days. And there's this, and even in the band once or twice, like I got pretty ripped, and it's like, man, you were great tonight.
Oh.
You had like no filter. It was awesome.
Right.
We were so into it. And so even getting this like, oh shit, should I be drunk every time I play? Like, am I better? And there's even building the confidence where without the filter of alcohol, you're able to let go, because you can get used to that too. And it's like the alcohol is what lets me be like, and not give a shit. And then it's fun if I don't give a shit.
It's dangerous to like have a great show when you're boozed up, because then you're like trying to kind of chase that lightning, I remember doing that early on and being like, oh, can't go on stage without 2 beers. And then before you know it, it's 3 beers. And then, man, the days are dark. Those days are long and dark. And like you said, like you're borrowing from tomorrow, and it's a
might
dark
have a good
feeling.
First 3/4 of the set,
Yeah, and I suck
Kinda
at partying,
tanks
Glenn.
into
I can't party for shit. And I remember like touring with friends and buddies, or even like people I looked up to they'd be boozing, and I was like, well, shit, I gotta keep up with these guys. This guy's my hero. I gotta keep up with them. And then by day 4, you're like, this is not sustainable. These guys are professionals.
No, totally. I mean, I think, Townes Van Zandt couldn't, how can I say? Townes Van Zandt couldn't hold up to being Townes Van Zandt. Like, even he couldn't handle being Townes Van Zandt. Yeah. And there were a lot of people around him who my impression was tried to drink like Townes Van Zandt.
Right.
And they couldn't handle it either. But yeah, so it's interesting to resist that. And then even just to go through, playing a bunch of shows until you learn to let go enough again without, any external fuel.
Have any songwriters done it successfully? Like, I know you mentioned Townes Van Zandt. He was kind of like, his character was intertwined with the whiskey, with the party, with the rough voice. I mean, and then he died of alcohol poisoning, right? I believe he did.
Probably
something along those lines.
Might have been that plus something else.
Yeah. Has anyone ever pulled it off successfully?
Like lifelong substance
like
abuse and alcoholism.
The Replacements, are they still raging?
I doubt it.
I saw Tommy Stinson play a couple years ago. He was partying it up, but I don't know what it's like on a daily routine.
Once again, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. What about now? How are you feeling these days, and what has been kind of your key to balance in such a strange time in history?
Well, I mean, I feel lucky to have found both like a sense of purpose in doing the live streams and, discovered the little donate button for nonprofits.
Cool.
And so when I started doing the live streams, I started doing 5 a week and then pulled it back to 3 a week on Facebook. And every single one was a benefit. And at some point people were going, can I send you money too? And so I'm like, okay, well, here's my PayPal. And so with those, they haven't been ticketed. And we've raised over like $100,000 for different charities.
Are you serious? Holy shit.
Yeah.
Nice work, man. That's cool.
And actually just a couple of weeks ago, like one of the fans has a brain tumor. He wrote in and was like, requested this song, I Will Not Take These Things for Granted, an old Toad song. And we ended up raising like probably 15 grand for him for his tumor, like, fan to fan.
Wow.
And so it's been really good to just step forward in a way where I've ended up making a living, which is incredible. And Stage It really helps with that too. And Stage It's definitely more of like, that's there to make money. Mm-hmm. But this little community, and it's old fans, new fans, they started calling themselves the Squirrels because, did you ever see Up, the Pixar movie?
No, I've seen the VHS box.
Okay, but there's this dog in it, and the dog, it has like a little collar that helps it talk, translates its thoughts, and it'll be saying, I love you, squirrel.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
yeah,
because I'll be looking at the screen, I'll start reading the chat, I'll get distracted, and I'll forget the lyrics. And so that's me squirreling is me forgetting where I am.
Love squirrel. I kind of wonder, like, is it a good time? Is it fun to be a squirrel? Because it's like they're jumping through trees, they're basically flying, but at the same time they're like horrified of everything, like what's going to eat them next.
I don't know. I think they're great. I just love their tails. I love the way the tail is so flowing and then stops instantly.
Yeah, their tail's bigger than their body.
It defies physics.
Right.
It's amazing.
Right.
But in this case, like, I guess I'm the dog and they're the squirrels who are distracting me. And so they call themselves the squirrels, and they're all just checking, like in the chat at these live streams. This is where they check in with each other.
That's really cool.
And they're like constantly supporting each other. Like they know if someone's going through a breakup or having a hard time or a medical issue. And, it's this group of people who are really kind to each other. And it's some people in the Philippines, Brazil, like it's been really lovely, and it's been great to keep that as something that's just an offering, and people give back when they feel like it.
Yeah.
And, it's not a paid or ticketed thing. And I love the energetics of that, just jumping into something with generosity. And it's been coming back to me in a way that, I've been overwhelmed with how, feeling really, really fortunate to have these people and be able to provide this. So for me, that's been a huge part in getting through this year.
Yeah.
But the stress of, both not going away. This is the longest I've been in one place in about 20 years, like since my youngest daughter was born. I haven't been at home this much ever. Pretty early on, I moved in with my girlfriend. It's the first time I've lived with somebody in a long time. And so there's been dealing with this feeling of being trapped. And because I'm so used to,
Sure.
I'm always in the next place, right? If I'm on tour, I'm ready to go home. As soon as I get home, I'm ready to go on tour. I never have had to sit. There's a part of me that's never just had to sit with myself for so long.
Yeah, circling back to the art of self-avoidance. I think that's being a musician, like the thing you do, you travel, you move, and in the process, you distract yourself from yourself, which feels good momentarily, but you kind of have to face the reaper when you get back, or when time begins to slow down again.
Yeah, so I've come to a point where I knew I needed to get really serious about my self-care. And, I've been doing a lot of yoga throughout and this and that, but like to make it the absolute number one priority, because I feel like I'm in danger of kind of ruining a good thing again. And once again, regardless of any of that, it's just important. I prefer being happy. And there's a lot more. That's the odd. It feels like irony, but it's not. And maybe the paradox of it is the more you're okay with being sad, the happier you get. And not sad in a depressive, indulgent victim way, but just authentically the pain of being alive, the pain of seeing people suffering, the pain of, this whole political atmosphere of, there was a point a few weeks ago, and, I'm typical super liberal, crunchy guy. And so, this Trump thing, like realizing my anger towards Trump supporters was something that I couldn't stand feeling anymore. Mm-hmm. Like walking around with that judgment and that anger. And that doesn't mean I have to lose, what I feel is something based in truth and something based in morality. So it doesn't mean I stop speaking for the things I care about, racial injustice or environmental destruction or, let's say just democracy itself. And, a place where truth seems to be something that is now
loose.
There's no agreement on, there's no agreement on like basic empirical fact anymore. If you repeat something, it becomes true. And so these things are upsetting, but my judgment about them and my judgment about people who followed, like I started hating people, and I couldn't stand for that in myself anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And so I've had to really look at my judgment and, and try to figure out how to come more to a place of, even if I like attempting to understand where people are come from, or just attempting to like, go that this, even if I do believe that a lot of what Trump is doing is patently bad, that I have to be able to not think that all these people are bad.
Sure.
To understand that they love their families, they're concerned. And, you know, even QAnon folks, it's like, if I honestly believed that Hillary Clinton was, eating children and sex trafficking out of pizza shops, I would be really upset.
Sure.
It's the most ludicrous idea in the world, but I have to go like, okay, these people are authentically concerned about something that, even if it is just a conspiracy, if it were true, they have every right to feel upset about it. They're scared, they're worried, they're concerned.
Do you want to hear something psychotic, Glen Phillips?
Sure.
My buddy Eric, one of my best buddies, lived across the street from the Pizzagate pizza place.
Oh, God.
So he's kind of watching it all go down, and he's like, wow, this is nuts. Like, everyone's in a rage. They're losing their mind. So as a joke, he goes onto their Facebook page, the restaurant's Facebook page, and he writes in the reviews, he writes, decent wings, pretty good pizza. Because all the rest of the comments were just hate, like, fuck Hillary Clinton, fuck like, they're bringing down the country. And his was the only legitimate review in the whole review column. And he just started...
Not glowing, even.
He started getting, a barrage of, like, violent hate. And people started, like, looking him up, like hundreds of people sending him hate mail. They're posting pictures of him and his family. They're like, I think he lives here. Here's his address. We got to kill this guy. And he has 2 adopted little Korean sisters. So they're posting pictures of him with his sisters, like, I knew it. I knew he was a pedophile. He's hanging out with these little Korean kids. So that's when he quit social media. He's like, okay, I needed a reason to quit anyway. I'm done. And he had a great attitude about it, considering his life was being threatened. But I mean, it's a
really scary time.
The abyss.
It's and I don't know, and once again, just that idea of like, I have no idea how we pull this back. And I'm finding myself, the irony of that I'm making my living off playing on Facebook, and that Facebook is such an engine for conspiracy theory and misinformation and informational siloing, and on the left as well as the right. And, there's that whole thing of like, I think I probably posted one thing that I didn't read and double check that, like, is one of those things, and you read it and it fits all my liberal rage. And I'm like, yeah, damn it. I'm going to post that and put up something. And then I find out it's just fucking clickbait lies from some Russian, disinformation campaign.
Vlad.
And it's so insidious. And at the same time, we have these engines of communication that are really powerful. I mean, there's this people wrote about this when television came out, that television had the potential at the time to be the greatest communicative and educational device ever created. And it just went for the bottom. Like, it's like, screw it. We're just going to have doctors selling cigarettes, and we're going to have,
What was the turning point of TV, where TV just really kind of went to the dark side?
Oh, pretty much instantly.
If we could just clone Mr. Rogers, everything would be fine.
Oh, God, Mr. Rogers. Well, and that's the thing. These, like, general benevolence. And Mr. Rogers got in trouble too, right? Washing the mailman's feet.
I don't remember that.
There was...
Wait, he washed the mailman's feet? What? I don't recall this.
Sorry, this stuff makes me cry. Like back in the day, the mailman was black. There was a lot in the air about civil rights at the time. And he had just had the mailman come in, and he's like, he's a minister, so foot washing means a lot for him.
Right. Okay.
Right? And he just had this simple thing of the mailman coming in and going, oh, your feet must be so tired. And let me wash your feet. And just like this really simple act that was so strongly anti-racist to the point of, an act of utter devotion, right?
Right.
And it drove people fucking crazy. Half the people who watched that lost their shit by crying. half the people who watched that never watched him again because they couldn't stand the idea that he would do that with a black man.
Oh, wow. What year is
and
this?
The kids just watched it and took it in.
Yeah.
So that's sweet. Not knowing what the gesture was, right? And so you take that, once again, him being a minister, taking that from, and I'm not a Christian, but taking that from somebody who's like life was deeply bound into his faith. It is such a profound act and such a profound statement. This was in the 70s, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
Early 70s.
I'm not a Christian person either, but like, I mean, if Jesus was a real dude, etc., I mean, Mr. Rogers was definitely the closest thing to Jesus we ever had, or maybe will have, He
was a pretty saintly dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so, and so like these characters, and I look at all the anger and divisiveness right now. And what's so frustrating about it is that people are upset about things that they have a right to be upset about. But those things may not exist in that way.
Yeah,
and it's so strange to look at a non-existent, child trafficking ring and be so upset about that, and then turn a total blind eye to, most juvenile sex work is survival sex work by runaway kids who are doing this just to eat because we don't have proper social services. We don't have, we don't have enough support for kids on the street. And so there is real need out there, and there also is, there is, some, California, there are some gang related child trafficking stuff. There's some pretty dark shit going on. And those are also complex things to solve, right? In the same way that if you're talking about, and I understand, I'm a pro-choice person. I understand a pro-life perspective. But to not be able to say I'm pro-life, and we need to make sure that when these kids are born, they have the best chance for a good life possible, right? And so the idea that every kid has to be born, but then there's no support for their mother, a mother who's impoverished or drug addicted or has been raped. And what do we do for her to support this baby that's so important? That is the most important thing for you. How do we make sure this baby has a chance at a good life, And that to me is pro-life. Like, what do we do for this baby that you're so like, you care about up until the moment of birth, and then you give nothing to? And so like, I feel we can find agreement if we can reframe some of these conversations. Like, there's so much common ground. It's like 90%
Yeah, it totally is.
And we get stuck in a 10% of an extreme inflexible, left and right. We get stuck in this 10%, and maybe it's 5 or 2% of inflexibility, which prevents any conversation, any working together. And to me, that's just like a tragedy. Anyway, it got really under my skin this year. The racism.
Yeah, sure. And I think we've hit like the top of the bell curve in that regard. I feel like we're just starting to come out of a pretty dark tunnel, and maybe that's just me trying to, pump my fist in the air and be an optimist. But I do feel the inertia turning, and I do feel like, everyone's going to be a little bit better friends in the coming year.
I hope we are. I mean, what I really hope, in this election, it's like, we all kind of knew he wouldn't accept a result. He said he wouldn't accept a result he didn't like. That's the power of positive thinking. Google the power of positive thinking and Trump. Long story there. Do you know about that?
I don't. Do people?
His family minister was actually the guy who wrote the book, The Power of Positive Thinking, which basically was talking about believe in what you want. Like, essentially, God will reward you if you are strong and you say what you want and you have no doubt. You are not allowed to ever doubt what you want.
Sure.
So it doesn't matter what other people tell you. You get what you want, and your success in that is a sign that you are on the right side. And Trump is a guy.
So that's like the power. That's like the philosophies that the ultra billionaire evangelicals use, where they're like, God will smite me down dead unless you give me $10 million right now.
It's tied into like, prosperity doctrine. You know, instead of being rewarded in the afterlife, you get rewarded now because you're so awesome. And so that that general attitude is kind of fueling this. I'm just going to say what I want until it's true. And Trump's never really experienced anything different, but he's taking a lot of people with him on this. With Barr now doing these investigations, I mean, it's really hard to rig an election, especially, and there was we won by, more than 3 million again. We won by 3 million last time, but he got the electoral vote. This time it turned out differently. I mean, it's a close election, but what's scary to me is if half the country thinks that this is an illegitimate victory. I had sour grapes about the last election because it was a clear majority of the vote. But I understand the Electoral College exists, and until it doesn't exist, you will continue to be, able to win. And I understood Gore versus Bush. They were 50 votes away, right? 50 votes away, which is close enough that a recount is an acceptable thing to do.
How do you break up the Electoral College? Like, it seems like it's clearly the dated philosophy that's got to go, but like, is that even possible?
It's possible. The Electoral College supports gerrymandering and supports, at this point, a kind of an undue influence of smaller states. And I understand why that was set up, but it means, and the more it's somewhat representational. But frankly, even with this, there are states, the way the Electoral College works, it could happen in Michigan that the legislature, the Republican-led legislature, could send one set of electors and the governor could send another. And this has actually happened before. Look this up. It's a weird one. And so you could have two sets of electors show up, and then they have to decide which set of electors to listen to.
Maybe they should just duel.
Dueling might be good.
Isn't there? There's a state that still has dueling that's still legal, and I don't know if it's Arizona, but
really?
there is a state where you can legally still duel if both sides agree to it.
Wow.
So
that would be a good.
Maybe it's Michigan. I don't know.
Maybe it's Michigan. In any event, like with all of this, it's just. I guess you were asking how I'm doing. I let myself think about this shit way too much, and there's no answer for it. And there's, to some extent, nothing I can do. And what I've had to do is kind of get back to a state of mind where it's like, okay, what do? I sing songs for people. I give them a little bit of peace. I do I've been over the last few years doing this kind of living room choir directing thing where it's these songs that are less designed to be listened to and more designed to be sung. So they're pretty repetitive, uplifting, but I've been doing, that on Zoom since this time. It's like, these are the things I love. These are the functions I have. The other function is to be present for the people in my life. And if I'm spinning out all the time about the Electoral College, I'm having to learn how to limit my news input so that I can be more present for the things I can actually do.
Yeah, well said.
And the good I can actually do, because I'm not going to make a difference, honestly. I'll line up and do a protest. I'll sign a petition. I'll send money to an organization. I'll be supportive in all these ways, and I'll speak what I feel to be the truth as compassionately as I'm able. But I'm not going to move the needle. And so whether it's Biden, whether it's Trump, whether there's a civil war, I have the exact same job, which is show up for the people who depend on me in the best way I can.
There you go.
Offer what I can.
It seems like you've built some great self-awareness over the years. That seems like a good positive note to wind it down on.
I gave you zero dirt from the road.
That was great.
This is going to be really disappointing to your core fans.
Glen Phillips, it's been cool riffing with you, man. Hell yeah. When the world comes alive, we'll get some vitamin D and some coffee in Santa Barbara, and I feel everything's going to work out pretty solid.
Sounds good. I hope it does.
All right, brother.